Hello and welcome to Cyber Life. My name is Ken Underhill, your host. In today's episode, I'm joined by world famous artist Joya Cousin. Joya and I are going to talk about mental health, and she'll share some of her personal stories around mental health as well as how she got started with art. So, Joya, let's just start with how you got interested in doing art.
Choose art. I chose love. So basically, I met and fell in love with my husband back in 2015. And, I had a high powered job at that point, but he was a French person living in the Caribbean. And I was in love with him and I decided I wanted to give love a chance. I was already 40 years old, but we thought it might be cool to try for a family as well. And we decided, okay, France might be the best thing to do. I didn't have any French and he didn't speak much English. But we decided, okay, we're gonna go to France. So I gave him my job, left the Caribbean, left my friends and family, and moved to France. And I was a housewife for the first few months. After the honeymoon was over, kind of just studying French on my own at home. And I saw somebody that I knew doing 100 days of art project on Instagram. And I had done the 100 Days of Happiness project where you take a photo every day of something that makes you happy and post it on social media. So I thought, oh my goodness, this is so fun. I had always loved art. I actually did art in A levels at school. So I took it for about 6 months and I thought I put together a really good portfolio, but I ended up with a C. And so that was the end of my art career. That had been more than 20 years before. And the first day I got a favorite quote because I love quotations. I wrote my favorite quote out on a piece of paper, just an ordinary piece of stationery. I guess I had some watercolor pencils, I think. And so I just used them and did a little watercolor design with a flower. That was my first day. And then the next day I did something else that took maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And then one day, a few days later, I did a sort of crosshatch portrait. And something inside of me just moved. And I thought, I felt it. I didn't know what it was, but there was some sort of curiosity or interest that was born, but it was really, really tangible. And so a few days later, I continued doing whatever, but a few days later I said, okay, let me try another person, another portrait. And I did with colored pencil. And a few days later I said, okay, let me try it with paints. And, I said to my husband, I'm really interested in this, this whole portrait thing. I feel really special when I'm painting people. And he's like, why don't you go for it? Let's go get some paints. So I went out and bought, sort of the cheapest pack of student grade acrylic paints with just like 5 colors, primary colors, black and white. And I started. And so I quit this 100-day project because I was interested enough to want to learn something new. It wasn't that I thought I was very skilled. My husband thought I had talent, but there was just that strong interest. My heart was really in it, and it drew me to wanting to do it every day. And so that's my story. I continued doing that just a little bit at a time for about 2 years. I actually sold a few pieces within months of starting. And then I had a couple of commissions. And then in the middle of 2019, I said, okay, this is it. I'm committing. I'm going to have a new career now. And so it's, I've been very, very blessed. I've been I've been able to ship paintings all over the world, about 75 of them so far. And it's been a wonderful journey. It's been very, very rewarding. Doing something that I love, but also being able to bless others in such a personal way, because it's usually sort of family members, honoring people who have passed or their children. And it brings me so much joy every day. I feel really, really blessed to be able to do that.
Well, that's so exciting, Joya, and it's interesting that way back when someone told you that, hey, you're not good enough to do this, but in reality, strangers around the world love your artwork and you're really, really good, in my opinion. So, Joya, there are a lot of suicides across the world every single day. There are some statistics out there on it, but a lot of it goes unreported. Even things like someone driving a car into a tree could be suicide, but we think, hey, it's just a car accident. So are there any indications or any warning signs that somebody might be thinking about suicide or contemplating suicide in their life?
I'd say it's well, of course, there are the documented reason or the documented indicators. Some of the ones would be sort of, lack of or loss of interest in day-to-day life. And this goes for kind of self-monitoring as well. If you notice that your mood is starting to switch, obviously, not obviously, I mean, some people know, some people don't, but having a major depressive period can sometimes trigger suicide or suicidal ideation. But of course, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. I think one of the myths about suicide is that it's something that is always sort of planned out in detail and in advance. That's not necessarily true. It can be something that where somebody just literally snaps, something devastating happens, they just sort of lose hope and decide to take the quickest exit out, unfortunately. Speaking from my personal experience, I lost my brother when he was 21. There was a lead up, a significant lead up to that. I never imagined it could have culminated in him taking his own life. He was 21, he was handsome, young, vivacious. He seemed to have a love of life. But there were indicators. He suffered with anxiety, he suffered with sort of a lingering depression, not well, by all appearances, it didn't seem to be a very deep depression, but it was something that was lingering. He lived with me for a period of time when he was around 16 years old, sort of 15, 16 in high school. And we had been apart for several years before, so I didn't really know what his, sounds strange to say, but I didn't know what his mental health background was. I didn't know that he had issues coming to live with me, and he refused to talk about it. So the first thing I did was I booked him with a therapist who, had really good reviews and who I had met with and trusted. She was very gentle and seemed talented and kind. And so that went on for the period of time that we lived together. And, he seemed to be okay. He had his issues, but I think all teenagers kind of go through the anxiety, the angst, but he was doing well at school. He was the star of the school play. He won a scholarship to go to, a very prestigious acting school. He seemed to have his whole life ahead of him. But there were some things that happened after that that I may not have been aware of. I certainly was not aware of. I actually moved to another island to work. He was living with my dad. Everything seemed okay. But there were periods when he just seemed a little bit off. I remember one night we were supposed to go out to a party, and I went to pick him up and he said he changed his mind. I'm like, okay, well, if you don't want to go, that's fine. We can just hang out, whatever. Then he changed his mind again. And, we decided to go. We had a great time. I still have photos from that night, but in taking him back home, he just sort of switched again, and I didn't know what was going on there. So he actually got, he got involved with drugs eventually. And this happened, unsurprisingly, after the sudden death of my dad. My dad died suddenly after being hospitalized for about 2 days. And, it was a really devastating time for me, certainly. I got really ill physically right after that. I was in another island and he turned to doing drugs. My family kept that from me, I think, because I was going through my own sort of difficulty. And he just wasn't returning my phone calls, but I talked to them and they said, he's fine, don't worry about it, he's fine. And I remember I had to get some major surgery done and he showed up, he came by to see me, and after I came out of surgery, I was staying with a friend and he came over and spent the afternoon there. So everything was fine. But all this time he's doing drugs, and he had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And he went to a drug rehab program. My own brother's in drug rehab, and I had no idea. I just knew that he was distant, but my family said, no, he's fine. And apparently in the rehab center, he threatened to commit suicide. And apparently when you do that, they release you. So I think the assumption was he just wants to get out of here and we have no choice but to release him. We can't hold him prisoner. Only he actually went through with it very shortly after. So, I've just shared my own story, just, the one experience I've had with that. But there's so many red flags along the way. It isn't always like that. We, heard recently the story of Chesley Christ, who basically, from what I've seen in all the articles I've read, there were no indicators that she was depressed or suicidal or anything, even to her mother, who says she spoke to her every single day, because it is possible to be depressed and really not even be fully aware of it yourself. Her mom described it as being high functioning depression. I think there's a clinical name for it, but it is possible to sort of have this low grade depression that follows you through your life, where, your mood isn't high. Think Eeyore from Pooh Corner, if you remember Eeyore, just kind of sad, or maybe even not like Eeyore, just down inside, not necessarily showing it to everyone else, but, reaching up to this crisis point without even really knowing it. So, the warning signs can be there and they might not be. Drug use, alcohol abuse, those are things that have, the potentiality to lead to that eventually, possibly. Anxiety, you can be, somebody who is maybe a cancer patient or with a terminal illness. You may have lost your job. I mean, there's so many different things that can lead to that point without necessarily being sort of a huge red flag. But I would say certainly if somebody that threatens to commit suicide, that it should be taken seriously every single time. It is not something that you say, okay, they're using it as an excuse for attention, or they're using an excuse to get out of something. I think if somebody's talking about it, it needs to be taken seriously. It may just be a cry for help, but if it's a cry for help, it means that help is needed.
Well, thank you for sharing that information, Joya. I definitely appreciate it. I know the audience does as well. So back on the artwork a little bit, I'm world famous, at least in my own mind, for drawing stick figures in art. So what do you think about that? Do you think that that's still art if someone's just drawing stick figures, or do they need to be able to create master canvases like yourself?
Art is a long journey. If you look at Picasso's journey, for example, it went through so many different stages. So I have no idea where I'm going to go, where I'm going to be in 5 years or 10 years. Who knows? Maybe I'll go back to stick figures. We never know, right? But as far as I'm concerned, anybody who makes art is an artist. So I don't judge other people's work. We have our own personal preferences, but anybody who makes art and has that heart of an artist and actually does it is an artist, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that definitely makes me feel a little bit better, Joya, knowing that even though it's stick figures, it's art, right? I'm still creating some type of art. So do you mind sharing a life lesson, like something that you've learned throughout your life?
So as I mentioned earlier, I lost my brother to suicide back in 2008. He actually committed suicide 10 months to the day after my father died. I don't know if that was coincidental. He left a note and all he said was, "I'm sorry." So after that happened, I was crushed, obviously. I remember being given the news at the office. I was working late. And I went over to some friend's house. Everybody was around me, just, comforting me, because I felt like I had just completely lost it. And after being there for basically all night, they were up with me. I was crying, I guess. I assume I was devastated. I probably left around 4:30 in the morning because I said, my dog's in my apartment. She's been there since yesterday morning, all day. She hasn't been let out. She hasn't eaten. I need to go take care of her. And they were like, "Are you sure? Da, da, da. Somebody else can go look after her." I'm like, "Well, I need to do it. And so I'm going to do this." So I drove home and I got her. And we went for a morning walk, as we do every morning. And we walked along the beach because I live in Antigua, I lived really close to the beach. So we walked along the beach. And of course, I was just bawling buckets still, just my body shaking and just in complete disbelief of what had happened. And I mean, living on an island, it's so beautiful. I wasn't facing east, we're facing west, but the beauty of the colors of the sunrise and the birds flying across the sky, And for a moment, I was like, how is this even possible that all of this beauty exists on the worst morning of my life, you know? But it was there. And I remember sort of collapsing on the beach and just watching the waves go in and out, just watching the tide in and out, in and out. And after a while, it started to calm me. And I realized that life is going to continue. It seems unfair. I feel like I don't want to go on anymore, but life is going to go on no matter what. And I told myself, you still have a chance to continue living. You still have a chance to continue to experience this beauty. Your brother does not, your father does not. And I just promised myself to make the most that I could of my life, to be the best person that I could be going forward. And so that's what I've struggled to do. In both in terms of making myself the best that I can be, but also appreciating the beauty around me, appreciating the kindness around me, accepting love into my life, all of that. So it was actually the morning of my birthday. I, looked at my phone and the news feed, and then I'm seeing this message about Chesley Christ having committed suicide. I remember her. I didn't follow her story. I didn't watch the show, but I just remember her because at the year that she won, 2019, I think there were concurrently 5 Black beauty queens. So they were photographed together quite a few times. But just reading her story that she had jumped through a window, I mean, I was crushed. This beautiful person with a big heart who loved people and wanted to make a difference in the world and had every indication that she would continue to shine and continue to be a star. Ending her life, it took me right back to that first morning after my brother's death. And it was my birthday, so I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't tell my husband about it because I didn't want to sort of bring down the mood or be miserable. And, we spent some time together during the day, and we went out for dinner that night, and I enjoyed it. It was fantastic. And I'm not sure, so we went out late, and then I woke up at like 3:30 in the morning and came into my studio and worked. And I thought I was just going to work for a few hours until maybe sunrise and then go sleep or whatever. But I stayed up. So I'd literally only gotten 2 hours of sleep or 3 hours of sleep, and continued working all that day into the next day. And then I did the same thing again the next night, So I was kind of running myself ragged without stopping to realize that I needed to sort of support myself emotionally. I needed to stop and recognize maybe the sadness that was kind of taking hold of me, but I didn't do that. I didn't stop. And so it got to the point where I think this was the 3rd day on, I woke up again in the middle of the night and came to the studio, and I didn't even paint. I just sort of did administrative stuff, and it was only for an hour. But it was funny because that afternoon I had been looking at my computer screen and I started seeing little stars descending. It was pretty bad. I was just completely sleep deprived, and I just sort of batted it away, And so in leaving my studio an hour later, I can't remember what time it was, I just walked straight into the well. That we have a well that's between my studio and our home. We live in the country. And honestly, I still don't know how I did that, because to hit that well, I would have had to turn 30 degrees in the wrong direction. But it was pitch black. Normally there are stars, normally a security light comes on. That didn't happen. And it was just like I saw stars. It was just like the most intense pain. It hits my shins. I didn't actually fall, but it hit my shin, both shins, so hard that I was so embarrassed, first of all. I'm alone in the dark, but I was so embarrassed. And I just went into the house. I went into the living room on the sofa, and I just cried. I think I just sort of emptied all the sadness and all the emotion that I hadn't allowed myself to feel over those past few days. And I realized that my reaction had been, in my grief, the reaction that I'd had was to keep that promise that I made to myself, to do the best that I can, to do more and to do more and to do more, as opposed to giving myself a hug and realizing I need to take care of myself in that moment. And because you can't, I always say you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself first. You have to realize that if you want to be kind to everybody else, you have to learn to be kind to yourself first. You have to treat yourself almost like the most important person in the world, so that you can then share all of those gifts with everyone else. And that is exactly what I wasn't doing. I was draining myself past the past the battery alarm signal, to the point where I hurt myself. It could have been worse. It could have been worse. I didn't even fall. It was just such a warning for me, like, alarms going off, stop. What do you think you're doing here? And so it was just a chance for me to reset and realize that, no, stop. You're sad. You've had your cry. And I just sort of let it all out. I mean, I cried from the pain. It hurt so much. I thought, note to self, if anybody ever attacks you, take that baseball bat out of your purse and hit them in the shins, because they are going to die of pain. That hurts so much. But I just reminded myself to take care of me. And that was a message I just wanted to share with everybody. So I woke up the next morning and I just pounded it out in one go in a Facebook post. And then I shared it on LinkedIn a few hours later. But I just shared it directly from my heart to encourage anyone else who might have been going through a period of pushing themselves too much, or giving themselves, headaches and heartaches over things that they can't control. We aren't kind enough to ourselves. So that was the message that I wanted to share to everyone. Be kind to yourself first, and then you can be kind to the rest of the world.
Well, thank you, Joya. Any final thoughts for the audience out there?
There is no race. Time isn't running out, So, and we lie to ourselves about that stuff. We believe the hype. And I feel that way. I think everyone feels that way. Even though in my life, I've shown, finding love after the age of 40, and we're still madly in love. I'm so grateful for my husband. Finding a new career after 40, after something that I had given up on because I thought I wasn't good enough, which now earns me a living far beyond anything that I would have ever imagined. So time isn't running out. It really isn't. There is no race. We all have our own course to run. And I shared that aspect for people who might be hurting inside, those ones who might want to give up because they feel they don't measure up. I think that the emotion that's behind suicide most of the time is a sense of hopelessness, of feeling that you can't do better, that things can't get better, that you're not good enough somehow. And there are people who are very emotionally balanced and very self-assured and self-aware who can't imagine that. But there are millions, hundreds of thousands of people who feel that way every single day. They compare themselves to others, or I don't necessarily compare myself to others, but I compare myself to my own ideals and my goals and what I think I should be. And that can sometimes be an even more unreasonable standard. But it's not really worth it, it's, and speaking about mental health, that comes into self-care as well. Practicing these really healthy mindset tricks that can allow you to sort of let go of these unreasonable standards. I mean, over the last few years, I've focused less on specific goals and more on doing those things every single day that will lead to those goals eventually. So becoming the kind of person who will achieve that goal instead of sort of scrambling and pushing myself over the edge, trying to attain the specific goal. And I think it makes a lot more sense doing that. I was very, very competitive, having worked in the corporate world for over 20 years, or almost 20 years, let's not do the math. I loved having goals. I loved being competitive. I was aggressive. I was that bulldog. I was that pit bull, And coming into art, to be creative, you have to let go of that. You can't paint with anxiety. Well, maybe some people do, but for me, I need to achieve that sense of flow, a place of really of calm. And I had to learn how to center myself through meditation, through journaling. And those are things that I do every single day. It's very interesting to note that on those days when I sort of let everything slide, I didn't literally dropped my habit. I mean, I have a 5-year journal. I'm in the 4th year now. So you'll see those missing entries, like what happened on those days. You know, what weren't you? I journaled on my birthday, but not on the 2 days after that. And that's an indicator that, okay, hello, you're not doing the thing that will keep you in line. And with meditation, that has, it has been such a huge help for me, because it literally taught me how to just be present, to calm those voices, the monkey brain, and be still and learn how to be alone. Because that's the thing about art, it's lonely. You create all by yourself. There are hours and hours and hours spent alone. I never had that before in my life. I had to learn how to do that. And so I, incorporated those practices into my life to strengthen those muscles in order to become that artist, or be able to function well creating every single day. It's not easy. That creation comes not from a place of anxiety. It comes from a place of flow. And I think flow is sort of our optimal place to be. It's when you can lose track of time, you can sort of muster the best that is inside of you and create without pressure. And I never experienced that fully, or maybe I knew it, but I didn't, maybe I did it, but didn't understand it or learn how to get into it until after, until I left the corporate world. And I think that is the place that we should try to achieve in our own lives. This place where we let go of anxiety, we let go of pressure, we let go of depression, and depression is sort of mulling about things that have already happened, most likely that you can't change. You can't change what's already happened. And to stay fully in the present, fully aware of yourself, fully loving yourself, and just being, just doing what you need to do to be your absolute best self. And I think that's the way that we were all sort of meant to live. I think that's where the best of us comes from. It's impossible to sort of, be in love with somebody and appreciating them in that moment, that moment that you fall in love, that moment that you hold their hand, that moment you look into their eyes. That's a moment where you've let everything go to give yourself that chance to be you and to appreciate another person, being fully present. So I would say, let's try to get there. That's something that I, try to incorporate into my life more and more. I've been revisiting that topic with myself. And I think that it's not just a matter of painting, but wanting to exist in that moment as much as possible, because life is so very precious. And I think we do all need to remember how precious it is, in honor of all of those who have passed, who've struggled and haven't made it. We have that chance to make it, but we won't make it by beating ourselves over the head, by telling ourselves that we're no good. We will make it by celebrating the moment and celebrating ourselves and greeting each day with love in our hearts.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Joya. You've shared a ton of good information in this episode. So now the main question is, how do people contact you? If anyone out there is looking to commission a piece or just get in touch with you, how do they do so?
JoyaCousin.com, or at Joya Cousin on Instagram, Facebook, wherever, YouTube, LinkedIn, that's welcome as well. So Joya Cousin, easy to find.
Well, that's easy enough, like she said, JoyaCousin.com. So again, Joya, thank you so much for taking time out, joining us all the way from France in this episode of Cyber Life. Shared a lot of good information. We look forward to seeing you again on the show. And be sure to check out Joya's artwork again, JoyaCousin.com, or you can find her all across social media as well. Be sure to follow the Cyber Life over on LinkedIn as well as our YouTube channel, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.